Hi everybody, and thank you for coming. I'm Jack Edson, and this is my piece, favorite collage portrait of the artist Alan D'Arcangelo. So during the talk, I'll try to say a few words about Alan D'Arcangelo, and then like the technique, involved. So anyway, last fall, John had the idea of artists talk about artists. So I immediately signed up for it, asking if I could do a talk about Alan D'Arcangelo, because he really is one of my favorite artists, not just like Buffalo artists, but he was born here in 1930 over on the east side of Buffalo, East Ferry Street, one of those side streets off of East Ferry. So he's as Buffalo as you can get. And then during the 50s and 60s, he pretty much devoted himself to art. And if you think of his work, it's, here are two catalogs, you're welcome to kind of look at. How about those two, just kind of show them. So he's often called, like a pop artist, but he really isn't a pop artist. They usually talk about his images of the highway, flat surface with, the highway number 1 going off into oblivion, more or less, with maybe a sign of Texaco or a star or Pegasus, the oil company. So anyway, that's Alan D'Arcangelo, but there's a lot more to him. So anyway, I went to the opening of the Whitney Museum, the new Whitney, a couple of years ago, and we just got off the elevator, and the elevator door opened, and whammo, there was one of Alan D'Arcangelo's pieces, American Madonna, with image of Jackie Kennedy and Caroline, with just blank faces. So I thought, wow, he really has not been forgotten, and people love him. So I understand there's a couple of shows coming up in the next couple of years. But anyway, enough about him. He died in 1998, so 1930 to 1998. What I frequently do in my work is I do quilts. There's a show at 500 Seneca Street, the Chaos Project. It's up right now. I'm doing a talk Wednesday at 5 o'clock, this coming week, if you're able to come. So anyway, I usually do big quilts based on pieces of like great art, like the background of some painting or an artist's portrait. So they're usually people whose work I love very much. I might look through maybe 1,000 images before I really nail one that I really am going to spend a couple of weeks working on. So anyway, when I was doing the work for the research for the artist talk on artists about D'Arcangelo, I thought I'll look him up on the internet, and there'll be a page here, a page there in the catalog, and that kind of thing. Well, I met one of his relatives who lives in Williamsville, and he mentioned that UB has his archives. So there was, as I heard, like a ton of stuff in a storage unit, and the son offered it to UB. So it's at the Anderson Gallery, and there's 40 boxes of stuff with a finding aid, telling you what's in each box. So I spent a couple of weeks going through his diaries, and he's got his passports, 3,500 canceled checks with signatures. I mean, not to never throw anything away. So anyway, that's who Alan D'Arcangelo is very, very briefly. About the work, I love fabric, and I started doing portrait quilts, 10, 15 years ago. And I'm sort of specializing in it now. When I was doing the research for the talk, I became very immersed in the subject, Alan D'Arcangelo, and started doing this piece. Like you could sort of feel it, like I can feel like, this is really gonna happen. So what I did was I took this kind of like really beautiful photograph of him out of the catalog with the, emotion on the face, with the light against the dark and the dark against the light. It's really got everything. And took it over to the copy store. And then basically I put a grid on these things. If you think of early Chuck Close work, he's got the grid, and then, kind of wonky, things that you can imagine when put together are really gonna kind of look like, you think of Impressionist painting, all those dots, suddenly, wham, it really looks like, the subject. So anyway, I have to have a grid to work with. because otherwise you're gonna, it's like juggling too many balls, you know. So you really need something that's going to make sure it's not, you know, going in the wrong direction. So, where does this go? Can you see the guy's face? You know, it's just made out of pixels and no computers, no nothing involved in this kind of thing. It's just me and my little brain and my little, you know, backs of envelopes work, mat board works, you know, whatever's lying around, to do a drawing of each square to see what we're doing. And finally, the little, you know, my little friend, you know, I make these out of manila folders or whatever you want. Here's, I don't know, Bill or something. So I'm always using these just to mask out the little square I'm working on. When you look at, you know, the large picture, the question really is, where are you going to begin? How am I going to do this thing? But if you start breaking it down, you know, like start with the background, start with a piece that's got 2 different colors, and put your little window over it, so you're only looking at that one, and you start looking for like quilt design patterns. You know, there's only so many of them. There's only so many, but then it's almost infinite if you look at it the other way. So start making these squares one by one, and before you know it, the ball's really rolling. So here's I've got a quilt block, you know, pineapple. So sometimes I just make these kind of in flesh colors, you know, that could be thought of somehow, you know, some maybe highlights or something like that. But sometimes I just make these to more or less get the ball rolling, because I love the material. Like sometimes you go to the store and you just like buy something that you know is going to be very important to, like this, you know, this purple is really gonna, you know, gonna be something someday. So anyway, that's kind of, you know, what we're doing. And probably out of 10 minutes, but as you can see, sometimes they use other shapes like the triangle. So you can't let it become kind of boring, you know, like, yeah, I've already done that, or whatever it is. And then each one of these pieces does not have the same formula as another one. Like, if we've already done it, we've done it, you know. And I want to do something different, because it's not to make the product, it's this kind of like engagement, you know, the hours that we're working with it, and, you know, whatever comes out of it, so. Okay, so did anyone have any questions? I've got 2 minutes, and I could maybe, you know, people always say, where do you get the fabric? Or people give me a ton of fabric. Nancy Balfour gave me 4 bags of it.
What we're looking at, is it interwoven or just sort of sliced up?
Oh, sure, thank you. This is a collage, so if you think about, you know, what Picasso and Braque came up with the idea of the collage, where they would cut out paper and paste it. Coller, I think, is French for pasted. So this is, I'll do a grid on a piece of foam core or something, and then paste down, I would cut like hundreds of different colored squares, 1-inch squares in this case, and start pasting them down. And you, the first layer, I'll get something like that looks like this. You know, you hold it at the end of the room, and it's like, yeah, you know, I can start to see, you know, like the face beginning. And then sometimes I just leave them like that. But other times it's like, no, this one really needs, you know, either some other shapes, or I'm really going to try to nail it. Like, you know, the ear's going to look like an ear. You know, not just block, 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 you know, that kind of thing. So, but also, you're working back and forth. Frequently, I'll cover the whole thing with 1-inch squares, or whatever size it is, and then start examining it. Like, I mean, this part, yeah, that is right for that color, but the other part, which is a shape, that really needs to be warmer, darker, lighter, cooler, or something like that. And then the whole idea also is to work out some patterns, because, I mean, my great love is American quilts, and the pattern, you know, the repeat, you know, A, B, A, B, A, B, or whatever it might be, is very important. And it just sort of, so I've got kind of like 1 foot in the art world, 1 foot in the, you know, quilt world. So, anybody else, or maybe we're out of time? Yeah, good.
My 2 cents is that it'd be interesting to see the work without the frame.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a
Well,
thought, because it just would help it to breathe.
yeah, I think you're right,
You
yeah.
know, it just gives it a little bit more area for the viewer to come into the work.
Yeah, eliminating the distracting reflection. Although, I mean, one thing is you see yourself in the glass, and it's so fundamental to portraits. You're looking at it, but it's looking back at you. So it's almost like, I saw a show recently, maybe it was Robert Harris. Somebody wearing glasses, and then of course the image of the viewer, was painted on the reflective sunglasses. So, I'm done.